Hello and welcome to the Man Within Biblical Masculinity Workshop. So excited to have you guys here today. Let's go ahead and get right into it. All right. Before we get started, let's cover a few ground rules. Number one, this is a workshop. Key root of that word is work. I want you to come in fully prepared to put some effort in, put a little work in. I want you to leave with value, but that requires putting in a little effort and getting some value for yourself. So go ahead and get yourself a pen and paper for notes. You're going to want to take notes. That's how you're going to get the most value out of this and leave with the most value. If I ask a question, whenever I have these exercises, like I said, put some work in, get the value out of it. And even if you don't think that you're going to get some value out of the exercise, just try it. I promise some new idea will pop in your head. Any questions you have, put them in the chat. I'll address them as we go. Let's be mindful of everyone on the call. Just a quick reminder, keeping that mic off. If you have a quick question, go ahead, pop it in the chat, and I will answer it as we go. Lastly, keep an open mind. Your mind can't absorb new ideas if it's closed off. So let's go ahead and get rolling. If it is at all important for you to change your life, find your God-given purpose, reach your fullest potential, and unleash the full power of your masculinity, you can consider this the first step. So what are we going to cover today? Biblical masculinity versus the worldly masculinity. What is God according to a man? And what is this version of a man we have today in our world? Where are we at? How did we get here? What is the role of a biblical man according to God? How do you become that sort of man? How do you find your purpose? Now that we know that what a man is, how does that lead to our purpose? How do we find that? And if you've gotten enough value out of that point, I'm not going to let you leave without another next step, even more value. I've only got 2 hours with you today. There's a lot that we can do and a lot of work to be done. So let's go ahead and get rolling right into it. Why are you here? Go ahead and put some of your answers in the chat. Why did you take some time out of your Tuesday evening to be here? What caught your eye? I'll go ahead and just give you 30 seconds to do that. All right, great answers, guys. I'm seeing things about finding your purpose. You want to understand what a man is. You want to unleash that potential. Someone said he wanted to be that Christian warrior. Love it. All good stuff. Well, guys, you are in the right place, and we are going to touch on all of that good stuff. You are in the presence of other good men who want the same thing. So before we get rolling into some of the content, you might want to know, who am I? Why should you care what I have to say? Well, that's a great question. This is me back in 2017, 7 years ago. I'm 22 years old. This is when my life started to change. I remember on my 22nd birthday, I was very low. I was in college. I believe it was end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year. And I was just at a really low point in my life. I just spent the last year and a half chasing a girl. I had no confidence. And I got to a point where everything in my past, things that I didn't really realize were abnormal, things that I didn't really realize were destructive, all of that stuff, that girl was just a trigger to all of this stuff from my past coming up. And I got to this place of deep, deep depression. I had realized for so long in my life that I just was not happy. And I was at a place where I was weak. I was afraid to take risks. I didn't know who I was or what I was capable of. I was very submissive. I was a rug for people to walk on. I was deeply depressed. I was deeply insecure. I was a people pleaser. Like I said, I let people walk all over me like a rug. I was trying to get validation from other people when really I needed to try to get some validation for myself. But it's hard to get validation for yourself from yourself when you don't know who you are. I put women on pedestals. My whole purpose for being was to pedestalize women. That's what I believe, and that's how I lived my life, and that's how I got myself in this dark, depressing place. I was worried about others' opinions. I knew I was made for more, but I was way too afraid to take any risks. Not only that, I had nowhere to go. This is a big one. I was over-mothered, under-fathered. Come from a home where mother pretty much wore the pants in the family, and what she said went. And I didn't really have much guidance from a masculine perspective from my dad. He was present, but he was far from wearing the pants in the family. He was far from being the leader. I had a weak relationship with God. I grew up in a, you know, they call it a Christian household, but we didn't really emphasize anything about God outside of church. So I had a weak relationship with God. I always wanted more, but I couldn't find a way out of my situation. And a lot of times I went to fill that void with things of the world instead of through God. I was finding people and circumstances to blame and make excuses instead of taking accountability for myself, everything I had in my life. Fear and comfort had a stranglehold on me. And lastly, I felt like no one knew the real me. I just felt very lost and confused and lonely. So that's where I started my journey, back 22 years old on my birthday. But who am I now? Who's talking to you now? Today, I'm a strong, confident man that stands in front of you. I'm purpose driven. I know who I am. I know my God given purpose. I know my God given calling. I have a stronger relationship with God than I've ever had. Self aware. I'm grateful. I live my life with gratitude. I live my life with happiness, good days and the bad. I take action with direction. All of my actions now are intentional moving forward because I have that clear purpose, that clear vision. So I take intentional action because I have direction. I'm always getting better today and the rest of my days. And that's the whole purpose of life. You're always improving. You're never just stagnant, sitting where you are, sitting in your comfort zone. I'm 100% full belief in myself and my capabilities as a man. I take accountability for myself, my actions, everything I have in this life, and I feel unstoppable. And like I said, I know God's purpose for me. So, how does the world define a man? A man, according to the world, is one who's in love with the world instead of God. They believe that the world is going to give them everything that they want, everything that they could desire, but they're very far from the truth. Because Proverbs 14:12 says, "There's a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way to death." I have experienced this in my own life. I don't know if you guys have too. You're free to put your own experiences in the chat. But when we try to go on our own path, the one that's separate from God, a lot of times we end up rewarding ourselves with punishment. Today's masculinity is defined by what a man can provide, not his character. I don't know if you guys noticed that today in our culture, but it's a man is measured by worldly standards, wealth, status, looks, how many women he can sleep with. And these are not true measures of success. These are temporary things that are going to die. They're not going to go with you. They're not eternal gifts. Not only that, they're not things that give you pure joy and fulfillment. These are temporary solutions to temporary problems because this life is temporary. That's why they idolize the things of this world. They sacrifice their own purpose for safety and security, meaning they fully believe that money is the source of all their happiness. It's the source, it's the solution to all their problems. The wealth, the status, the looks, the women. One of those things or all of those things are somehow a permanent solution for your temporary problems. And that's just not true. If you sacrifice your purpose, you lose meaning. Now, you might be successful in worldly standards, but as Tony Robbins says, success without fulfillment is the greatest tragedy. These men are weak and spineless, and they avoid conflict. And lastly, they're not dangerous. There's no virtue in a man who's not capable of causing destruction. There's not virtue in a man that's not capable of doing some dangerous things that need to be done in order to protect others. So as Mark 8 says, what good is it to gain the world but lose your soul? So what is the modern man? What does that actually look like? Well, here we have a great representation of one version of the modern man, which is the complete antithesis of masculinity. Today's modern man doesn't know his masculine nature, had no one to define it, had no good role models to explain it. He accepts whatever lie he's told to fit in with the crowd instead of thinking for himself. But as we'll touch on more, it's much better to be right alone than be wrong in a crowd. But a modern man doesn't know that or believe it. He tries to find himself on someone else's path. He rejects God. He's overmothered and underfathered. What's sad is more and more boys these days have more and more influence from women in their youth and their impactful, their formative years than they have from men. There's more and more single mothers, and a good majority of elementary school teachers are women. So there's more and more boys today that are being raised by women fully 100, almost 100% of all of their adult influences are from women, and women are trying to teach men how to be men, and that just doesn't work because only a man understands what it is to be a man. Only a man understands the responsibility that comes with being a man. Likewise, only a woman truly understands what it is to be a woman. Today's modern man is lazy and undisciplined. They seek meaning and pleasure. When you seek meaning and pleasure, you end up with neither. They don't have a purpose because they don't have a good relationship with God. They're fearful instead of courageous. They're weak, overly obedient. There's no godly foundation to stand on. In other words, there's no true strength. There's no real true strength in today's men because they've rejected masculinity. They've rejected anything to do with masculinity. And there's two extremes on this cycle. There's one where the man completely rejects masculinity because he either had an overbearing father or he just fell into the trap of the world and, today's modern feminism, or they're completely unhinged and they're chaotic and they're out of control because they had no one to teach them how to actually harness that masculinity and use it for something good. But more and more today, we're seeing it go towards the feminine side because we're told that anything to do with masculinity should be rejected. And we're going to see how that actually affects us here in just a second. So, a man of the world are guided by the desires of their flesh, not the spirit. And this is the eternal internal war that we have waging inside of us. It's the battle between what the flesh wants, what our body wants, and we are in this world, but we are not of it. Well, our flesh is not going to go with us to heaven. The flesh is in the world, so it desires worldly things. Galatians says, "For the flesh desires what is contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want." There's so many times in my life, and maybe you guys can reflect on it too, but anytime I went my own way, meaning I followed the desires of my flesh instead of the desires of God, anytime I ended up doing what I wanted instead of what God wanted, it ended up, when I pursued ungodly things, I got ungodly consequences. And that's what will happen. And a lot of times it'll end up putting you right back to a place that's worse than how you started. So doing what you want is actually rewarding yourself with punishment. So how did we get here? How did we get to this place? A poor relationship with God, a lot of fear. We've been instilled with a lot of fear. We should be afraid of our masculinity. We should be afraid to take risks. We should be afraid of anything slightly dangerous. This led us to be weak because we're afraid to get out there and grow. But men need challenge to grow. Instant gratification. We're avoiding hard things. This instant gratification is just short-term pleasure that leads to long-term pain. We have a lack of good role models. As you can see, the role models on the right is like I said, kind of two ends of the spectrum. Now, the rainbow hair, we won't get into that, but the Andrew Tate thing, we won't get too deep into that either. There's things that he says that, are great, but let's face it, what he teaches is not Christian principles. It's not rooted in Christian principles. It's a lot of what he says is an attachment to things of the world, like wealth and fame and women and that kind of stuff, But there's a lot of guys going to that because he's at least some source of masculinity. So we need more good, masculine, godly role models out there. There's a lack of education. Like I said, there's no one to teach them. There's more and more boys that have 100% influence from women. They have a lack of purpose. And I just wrote, life is a lot easier when you, this is the lie that we're told, is that life is a lot easier when you want to sit inside your comfort zone. It's a lot easier to just forget about what God tells you to do. It's a lot easier to just not pursue those really difficult things. It's a lot easier to just get on the easy route that everyone else tells you to go on. Go to school, get a job, work that job until you die. Your whole life's set up for you. Eliminate all the risk you can. Well, it might sound easier, but like I said, when you avoid God, when you're not obedient to God, you're going to be rewarded with ungodly consequences. Ignoring our calling falls in line with what I just said. For example, Jonah's disobedience to God. Instead of Jonah doing what God asked him and going to Nineveh, he fled. He was afraid and he was angry at the Ninevites. What happened? He was swallowed by a whale, and God kept him there for 3 days. I can't really think of too many consequences that would be worse than that. But that's a over exaggeration of what can happen when you're disobedient. So where does this lead us? These are places that it's led me in my life. And if any of these things pop out to you, feel free to put them in the chat. This leads us to being overly cautious, playing it safe. You don't want to make any waves. In other words, you don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to get off on the wrong foot. You're just, I've got this welcome mat because this leads you to being someone that's walked all over because you're too weak and spineless. You can't stand up for yourself. You can't think. You can't think nor stand up for yourself. And I was in this place too. And it's not that I couldn't think for myself. I was just too afraid to speak up because it just felt like no one wanted to hear what I had to say. Well, a big part of that is being in the wrong environment. If you're in the wrong environment, no one's going to want to hear what you have to say. But I was a people pleaser. And I tried to get my validation by sucking up to people and being a welcome mat. Not a fun place to be. People pleasing. I was submissive. There was no spine. There's no dominance in me whatsoever. And a lot of men today, they'll submit to whatever someone else in the world tells them instead of surrendering to God. So people will treat you exactly how you believe you deserve to be treated. A belief starts to form within you when you start thinking certain thoughts enough times. Thoughts become beliefs become your identity, and eventually you're going to start believing those thoughts, and you're going to identify as someone that's just, he's not worth it. He's weak. That's how you act. Where else does this lead? You're going to end up doing the same thing over and over without making any real changes because you're too afraid to get out of your comfort zone. You're too afraid to take any risks. So you get stuck in this comfortable cycle of meaninglessness. And I want you to understand that this comfort zone your comfort zone doesn't just stay one size. It's either shrinking or growing. So if you never get out of it, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're afraid to do less. You're too scared to do even less and less and less. So you get caught in this cycle. You have a life without purpose, without meaning. You're stuck in this 9-to-5 lifestyle. There's no foreseeable way out because you just listen to what everyone else tells you to do. You're living someone else's dream. A big root of depression, the way that I define depression, is you're living as a character that's not you. You're identifying as someone else that's not you. Well, this identity, like we just talked about, come from beliefs. Well, a lot of those beliefs come from other people who also don't believe in themselves. You're identifying based on someone else's dark, depressing view of the world. You're living someone else's dream. And then, can you imagine how tiring that would be to just put on a mask and pretend to be someone else day in and day out? You're not an actor. You're not an actor. Just be you. You can be you. Obediently doing what society, your parents, your friends, etc., told you was the right way to live without question. We're as men, we weren't made as free thinkers, we weren't made to just not question anything. And last, this is a big one, addicted to a paycheck. Whoever's paying you is who you're at the mercy of. And a lot of people nowadays, especially, they have one source of income, which is that paycheck. Can you imagine how addicted someone's going to be if they have one source of income? How addicted they're going to be to, they're willing to do. An addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Well, if you have one source of income, you kind of got to give up a lot of yourself to get that one paycheck. But I'm telling you guys, God will provide, especially if you're obedient to Him. Lastly, you're never present because your mind is always thinking on something else, meaning if you're acting, you're being someone else, you're thinking as someone else, you're worried. You're in perpetual state of worry. So ignoring your purpose is listening to the world instead of God. Ungodly consequences. Lastly, where does this lead? Anxiety, unfulfillment. You're worried about the past. You're worried about the future. You're unfulfilled. You're depressed. Just a lack of expression of your masculine gifts. You're filling someone else's shoes, living someone else's identity. You're insecure. You don't trust yourself because you don't know yourself. You have low self-esteem because you've got no true, honest validation from a good, encouraging, validating source. You have poor self-worth. You have a lack of self-respect because you haven't done much worth respecting. And does this sound like you? Okay, I want to take a quick second to talk about our relationships with our parents. The relationship with your mother is kind of the first relationship that you have. When you're a baby, you're completely vulnerable. You have to be comforted. Your mothers are teachers. They're one of the first ones that teach you. Like I said, a lot of elementary school teachers are women. So women are meant to be teachers. Mothers bring life. Women are the almighty, they're the amplifiers. You give a woman something, she helps it grow. You give a woman a seed, she brings life. She brings life into the world. If you tell her about a business idea, she encourages you to help you grow, to help that business prosper. And you probably heard it said, behind every good man is a good woman. And there's a lot of truth to that. Women are natural amplifiers. However, today's world, we've got this effect of a lot of men being over mothered, under fathered. Mothers teach the children about God. They care for them, they nurture them, they comfort them. Women are all about preservation and comfort. They're not about risk and danger. They're kind, they help their husband, and they put God first in their life. So before we as men learned how to take care of ourselves, we needed to learn how to be taken care of. And we live our early years just like that, for the first 5 years of our life until we start to want to get out. We want to separate ourselves a little bit, as boys naturally do. But at that point, it's very hard for moms to let go. But it's a very natural thing. That's how boys go out and learn. We learn by getting out and doing, but women are very wise. Women are generally tend to be very book smart, and guys tend to be more street smart. We want to get out and actually do. We want to take risks. We want to feel it in our hand, and and get in that danger. And it's hard for moms to let go because they've been comforting us for so long and they want to preserve. So at that point where a boy wants to start separating himself and doing what boys do, they want to go play war games. They want to go out and explore nature. And that's where naturally the father would step in and say, all right, comfort time. Comfort time is pretty much up. We're going to start teaching you about life. And the sooner you start, the better. So women aren't letting go and fathers aren't stepping up. So what's happened is the father's lacking. So the mom tries to step in. She's trying to step in to play that father role, which is unnatural to them. It's unnatural to the boy. It leads to a lot of negatively impacting effects. All the effects in the last few slides are just some to name. A lot of those I experienced personally because of this happening. So when you raise a man like a baby, that's what he'll grow up to be. Now let's talk about our relationship with our fathers. Man's relationship with his father has some of the biggest impact on how we view manhood. If a father is absent, child's view of manhood might just be absentness, or maybe he rejects that. So he views masculinity already in a bad light because his father's absent, or maybe he's present, but he's abusive, or maybe he's physically present, but he's not fully present in every way that he needs to be. And so that gives him a negative view of masculinity. But I just want to give a few roles of fathers according to the Bible. I don't know if there's anyone here that has kids, but this is just a good refresher for you. Father prays for his children. Prayer is very powerful, and he knows that. He provides for his family, meaning he works, does what needs to be done to make sure that his family's needs are taken care of. He instructs his children. He raises them in the way of the Lord. He disciplines his children. He makes sure that his children aren't doing something that's harmful to them, not harmful to society, and he makes sure that we're fit to be productive members of society. He does that through disciplining us. And what's unnatural, and a natural thing today, is the mother trying to discipline, but the mother doesn't come from a place of strength the way a man does. And it's hard for a boy to fear something that's not stronger than him. A father encourages his children. Just like the mother nurtures and comforts and encourages, a father encourages too. A father punishes bad behavior, goes along with discipline. He trains his children, especially the boy. Just want to talk about boys and men today. A father trains his children because only a father understands the road and some of the battles that boy is going to face on his journey to becoming a man. So it's a father's role specifically to train his son into being a man. He loves his wife, meaning you marry a woman, you have kids with that woman, you love that woman, and you be a good role model for your children. Because marriage isn't, it's not just a one-time thing. The marriage isn't just the wedding. And especially after you have kids, it's not just something that's fun. It should be fun and loving, but it is work. It is a work. And you have to be fully committed to that. 100% of the time, be that role model. A father leads his family. The father is the leader because, like I said, he's hands-on. He's got those street smarts. He knows those battles that he's going to have to face. And he uses that knowledge to lead the family. And he's a role model. He's a role model because he does all of these things. Now, if any of these things stood out to you about, maybe your father didn't do one or two, or maybe he didn't do any of these things, and maybe you have a lot of resentment, what I want to say before you get angry, understand that he did the best he could with what he had. What I mean is he only knew what he knew at the time. And what was the relationship like with his father? What were some of the world or the life impact that he had coming up to the point where he had children? He was doing he was doing what he knew. And if he was there Hey, he was there, and that's a privilege. Even if you think he's the worst guy in the world, put yourself, look at it a third person point of view. If we don't forgive our fathers, we're at risk of continuing the cycle for our kids, which is the worst thing we can do. Now, you're not alone. What we're going to do is a quick little exercise. I'm sure that we can all probably relate to a lot of these first sections. So, what we're going to do is take 3 minutes to journal. What was the relationship like between your parents and or your father and his father? Which worldly beliefs have you been taught? Which worldly beliefs have you been caught up in? Is it chasing women, how many women you can sleep with, how much money you can make? Is it, you got to work that 9 to 5 job for the rest of your life and be safe? Which worldly beliefs have you been caught up in? How have your relationships with your parents impacted your beliefs? What sort of beliefs that your parents had from that they got from their relationships with their parents did they instill onto you? Meaning, if your grandfather believed one thing, how did it impact your father's beliefs? And how did your father's beliefs impact your beliefs? And lastly, have you taken the time to forgive? Forgiving yourself for doing the best you could with what you had. Yeah, now we can start to understand what that means. You're doing the best you could with what you had. I'm sure you've made plenty of mistakes in your life, just like I have, and all of us as humans will. Well, you were doing the best you could with what you had because you only knew what you knew at the point. So have you taken the time to forgive yourself and others who have wronged you or your parents? So take 3 minutes to journal about this, and we'll be right back. All right, if you guys are watching this recording, you can go ahead and pause and take as much time as you need. All right, guys, welcome back. I forgot one. What does your life look like in 5 years if nothing changes? That's a really powerful question. Let's go ahead and take 1 more minute to jot that one down as well. All right. We're going to wrap it up and continue moving on here. All right. What stops us from using and developing our masculine gifts? What stops us from feeling that true masculine power? Well, what's holding us back? Number one, the enemy. The enemy's main mission is to destroy us. The thief, in John 10, it tells us the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And Jesus says, I have come that we may have life and we may have it to the full. And I just find it amazing that he says, he didn't just say, I've come to give you life. He said, I've come to give it, I come so that you may have it to the full. He doesn't want us to just be alive. He wants us to live. He wants to give us that fulfillment, that fullness, that meaning, that joy, the true long-term, long-lasting, the permanent pleasure that we find in him, that we find in God. But the enemy comes in the form of counterfeits. And in 2 Corinthians tells us, Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. He comes in a lot of ways that are very tempting, but they're counterfeits. So, for example, lust in place of love. Lust is a temporary thing. And whenever you go down that road, like I said, ungodly consequences. The enemy tempts us with worldly riches instead of godly riches. Again, you're sowing temporary seeds. You're storing up temporary riches in a temporary plane. But we are in this world, but not of it. Pleasure in place of peace. Well, when you search for meaning and pleasure, you're going to end up with neither. But pleasure is not peace. Pleasure is comfort, but comfort kills if you stay there for too long. The enemy will use anything he can to get us to turn away from God. That's his mission. He wants us to be absent and void of anything good. Well, everything good is God because everything good comes from God. So he used a lot of mischievous ways. He'll use temptation. He'll harm us mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. He has the ability to do those things. He can manipulate the world and the people around us. He can he can get us to a place where we're angry and we blame ourselves and we hate ourselves. Well, we are creations of God. So if we hate ourselves, if we hate the people around us, we're hating an image of God, which is exactly what he wants, because he wants to separate us from God. Got temptation in there twice. Well, okay, he does it twice as much. He'll misinterpret the Bible to what false prophets will do, or people that reject religion or Christianity in any way. They'll misinterpret it. A big one I've seen nowadays is, they're trying to make a case for infinite genders, where they say God created man and women. He made them male and female. He created them, and they say, oh, well, the Bible says he created them. Well, that's a third. No, don't no. But that's one of the way that the enemy tries to twist and misinterpret. He'll even use our friends or family against us. He's very good at manipulation. And as soon as the enemy gets what he wants from us, what's he going to do? Abandon us. He's just using us to get us further from God. Well, I can tell you, the closer relationship you have with God, the more he's going to come after you. Okay. He's going to take a lot more time working on the people to have the strongest relationship with God. If you have no relationship with God, he's got you where he wants you. He doesn't need you anymore. And just as God is not done with you yet, God's never done with you. But just the same way God's not done with you, neither is the enemy. The enemy is very patient and he waits until you are at your weakest. But when you're at your weakest, that's when God's power is strongest. So another thing that stops us from embracing our full masculinity is these dangerous beliefs, these negative beliefs, I call them. I've broken it down into two sections. There's the direct negative beliefs. Direct negative beliefs are beliefs that are very clearly damaging. They're very clearly not good beliefs. So I've just kind of highlighted a few. I'm not going to read every one, but I just highlighted a few that I struggled with for a long time. And if any of these pop out to you, go ahead, feel free to put them in the chat. But something that I always struggled with was, oh, this always happens to me. I went into any, and let me know if you guys can relate, but I went into any situation I just already knew that it wasn't going to work out for me because nothing works out for me and bad things always happen to me. So inevitably, when things didn't work out, because I didn't believe it was going to, and to be honest, I didn't put any effort in to wanting it to work, to trying to get it to work out, because I, I didn't want to put any effort in, and I knew it was going to be uncomfortable. So, what do you think's going to happen? Well, I didn't know. I just figured that's what life was. I thought I was too ugly. I couldn't relate with anyone. So I thought I'd just be rejected. I don't fit in. Now I've got this list of indirect negative beliefs. These are things that you'll hear on a daily basis that, they sound right, but they're limiting. So this is a limiting beliefs that limits your full potential. And these are some that I struggled with. You guys can let me know if any of these you can relate to. I always had, oh, it'll happen eventually. I just figured if I just waited and did literally nothing, it took no action, that God was just going to bless me. But it doesn't work that way. God blessed the man who, for one thing, works. And that's part of being a man. And we'll get there in a minute. I also had this belief that, once I have X, then I'll start Y. Meaning, once I have more time and money, then I'll start working on the business. Well, the thing is, if you never start working on it, you're never going to have it. But that's a belief I had. I also had time is money. That is so bad, because guess what? What can you get more of? Money. What can you not get more of? Time. No amount of money can buy a single second of time. Time is infinitely more valuable than money, and you can use your time to make you more money. Make sure your money is working for you. You're not working for money. And that's that 9 to 5 lifestyle that has been instilled in us. It's such a bad belief. So I'm not going to read the rest of these, but just let me know. Okay. Well, I want to show you a few ways to kind of turn these negative beliefs into empowering ones. So I have some examples here of before the man within. So before this powerful godly thinking that a godly man would have. Some of these negative beliefs: I'm too young, things never go my way. And I have some examples of how we can turn that into an empowering one. So, for example, I'm too young. Well, you can turn that into something empowering by saying, oops, by saying, my age doesn't define my capability. Very true. Once I have X, then I'll start working on Y. Well, let's change that to start working on I'll start working on X right now so that I can eventually have Y. And that's the right way to think about it. That's just the way I am, or I won't fit in. They'll reject me. I don't concern myself with the opinions of people who are too afraid to get in the ring. So these are just some examples of how you can turn them into empowering beliefs that are really honestly true. So what's at the root of all of these negative beliefs? The root is that you're not good enough. Deep down, what we all crave is to be accepted for who we truly are. And I want to bring this back to the first sin. We all think that the first sin is Eve, biting into the apple. And it's very easy to say that, Eve she had the first sin. Well, there's a lot that goes to it. You can go really, really deep. Did you know that Adam was there? Adam was there in the garden when that happened. Well, he's meant to be the leader. But anyways, what I'm trying to get at, sorry, I just went off on a tangent. The first sin really is that we were trying to be like God, because what did Satan say? What did the snake say right before Eve took the bite? He said, if you eat this apple, you will be like God. Well, God made us in his image. So eating this apple was just denying ourselves. But what we crave deep down is to be accepted for who we are without shame. And isn't it interesting that the first thing Adam and Eve did after they ate the apple was they realized that they were naked. They realized that they were naked. Well, before they ate the apple, God created Adam and Eve. They were there in the garden. It says they were both naked and they were unashamed, meaning they they were made in God's image and they loved that. And that was enough. That was enough until Satan came along and tempted them. But look, you've already been forgiven. 2 Corinthians says, anyone you forgive, I also forgive. You forgive yourself, God will forgive you as well. You're afraid of someone seeing something that you don't want them to see. And good rule of thumb, if your grandma wouldn't approve of you doing it, don't do it. If you don't have guilt, you won't hold on to any guilt. These beliefs are based on opinions of people that care about the opinions of others. So a lot of your negative beliefs stem from the beliefs of other people who also have negative beliefs. And I just want to say that what you see in this world is not always the reality. What you see is your perception. Well, your perception is based on a lot of different factors. Your parents, for a big part, your teachers, the society, and mostly other people, whether it's movies or your friends or what have you. A lot of your perception and your views and your beliefs about life are stemmed by other people who have negative beliefs about themselves. So don't worry about the opinions of people who care about the opinions of others. You should care about your opinion of yourself and God's opinion of you. The reality is that, like I just said, and I have this really good quote that changed my life. You guys can write it down. If you change the way you look at things, what you look at changes. So get a new perspective. If it starts in your mind and ends with your mind, you control your mind. You control your reality. You were made on purpose for a purpose. We're going to touch on that more in a minute. But you are more than good enough because God created you with a purpose. Your mission is more important than the opinion of someone who is too afraid to start their own. So stop caring about what others think and stop thinking that they care, because no one cares more about anyone than they do themselves. So let's take a quick exercise. What are 3 negative beliefs that you've struggled with? And I can go back to that example page. How can you turn it into an empowering belief? So for one example, life's not fair. I'm not strong enough. An empowering belief would be I accept life's challenges because the challenges of life help me grow. Therefore, because I've gotten through those challenges, I am resilient. Well, you're all sitting here, so you've gotten through some sort of challenges. So why don't you go ahead and take 3 minutes to write down some negative beliefs and see how you can turn them into empowering ones. And I'll just go back to the example slide here. Let's go ahead and take 3 minutes. All right. We've talked about the past. Let's start talking about the present. What is a man here? Let's break it down. There's 4 archetypes of a man. First is a man is a leader. A leader is someone who inspires others to lead. A leader also starts by being a good follower. You have to be coachable. A leader, to lead means to go first, which means you have to be courageous enough, brave enough, willing to take risks. But at the same time, you're not doing anything else. You're not doing anything. You're not asking anyone to do that you wouldn't do yourself or haven't already done yourself. You're the leader. You've been through it, and you're able to lead because you've been through it. Now, this leads to the next point. A man is a mentor. On that path, he learned a lot of things. He went through those trials. He had to learn something new. And a mentor, as a man, the first thing we want to do when we learn something new is we want to turn around and teach the next one in line. Because a man knows, a man in his heart is compassionate, just like Jesus was compassionate. We know that this path is going to be difficult. And that's why we want to turn around and help the next one in line. It's not all about me. It's not just about me knowing the most or being the best or being the smartest or having the most. No, it's about making the most of my time on this earth. Part of that is being a mentor and giving back. A man is also a warrior. He has this warrior spirit that says, I'm going to fight for what I believe in. Nothing's going to hold me back. I don't care if you tell me I can't do it. In fact, go on and tell me I can't do it. The more you tell me I can't do something, the more likely I'm going to be to do it. The more motivated I am going to be to do it. So the warrior endures the pain so that others don't have to. When things go sideways and there's danger, there's a burning building, this warrior spirit doesn't think twice before running in and protecting those who he cares for. That's that warrior spirit that men have instilled within them. And lastly, he's a friend. Men tell the truth to each other. That's how men show love to each other. We tell them the truth. If someone is destroying themselves, if they're being self-destructive, a man tells another man, his friend, the truth, because the truth sets us free. There's nothing more loving than that. And it's difficult to hear, but as we already talked about, and we'll talk about more, men learn through difficulties. And a friend joins a relationship with the intention to give. Any relationship, the point of any relationship is to give. And that's exactly what a friendly relationship is too. Now, a man also is born with 3 core desires. And we start seeing this from a very young age. Number 1, he has built in a desire with an adventure to live. This isn't a fleshly thing. This is a spiritual thing. All men have this calling. They want an adventure to live. They want a battle to fight and prove themselves. And lastly, they want a beauty to rescue. They want someone to protect and provide for. That's why these superhero movies and these comics or these war games or the war movies, that's why men, they're called to these things. They're drawn to these things because if we look at a superhero movie, for example, it's always the same. This is pretty much an exact script. What happens is the hero hits some low point in his life in the beginning of the movie. And then he goes on an adventure and he trains, he gets stronger. Maybe along the way he does meet a woman, or maybe not. Maybe he trains and trains and trains, and he finally gets to this climax where they have this epic battle. And after the battle, all the dust clears, and there's that beauty that he gets to rescue, and they have a kiss in the end because he earned it. He just went through this whole adventure. Well, there's a reason it's scripted like this. There's a reason that's the formula, because that's what men want. That's our inherent desire that God instilled within us. So what is it that makes a man? Number one, I talked about this a few times. Challenge. Got this verse here from James 1. Count it joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith, the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. He's saying, rejoice in your trials. There's also a verse, Romans 5, which says, Romans 5, 3-4, rejoice in your suffering, because suffering produces perseverance, character, and hope. That's how men grow. Men grow through challenge. We grow through getting out of our comfort zone. That's the big difference between men and women. Men grow through challenge, and we grow through pressure. We're like a piece of coal that when you put a lot of pressure on it, it turns into a diamond. But women are like precious stones. They need to be preserved. Well, how do you preserve something? In order to preserve it, you have to protect it and try to keep it comfortable. You're definitely not going to want to put a whole lot of pressure on it. But as men, that's how we grow. What makes a man is responsibility. Nothing matures a man, or a person for that matter, but nothing matures a man like responsibility. For each will have to bear his own load. Well, men are, there's a lot of strength. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that strength of being a man. If we're to be the leader, that's its own load to bear. That's a lot of responsibility. But that's part of being a man, is having that responsibility, having someone to be responsible for. What makes a man? Discipline. 1 Corinthians says, I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I should be disqualified. What Paul is saying here in his letter to the Corinthians is he disciplines his body in a godly manner to keep it under control, meaning he's not being tempted by Satan. And he doesn't say it, but one good form of discipline of your body is exercise. You're telling your body, hey, I know you don't want to do it, but guess what? I have control of you. I'm going to exercise some discipline, and I'm going to take care of this godly temple. But what Paul is saying here is that he's practicing what he's preaching. Meaning, if he's preaching this to others, he should be a man of his word. Otherwise, to others, I myself should be disqualified. Well, be a man of your word. Brotherhood, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That's what we're doing here today. We're Christian men, or men who want to deepen their relationship with God, meeting together, have this mastermind. There's already been a few really good insights that came from this. So there's a lot of things that you've gotten from these exercises, or maybe when someone was sharing, you gained a lot of good information. Well, two minds are better than one. One man can keep you accountable. Another man's thoughts might expand yours because they thought of something that you didn't think of, or they were a leader and they've been through it and they're able to teach you. But you do this through brotherhood. And lastly, what makes a man is commitment. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and behold, the new creation in Christ has come. And I just had a realization the other day that I was focusing more on clarity. I want clarity, clarity, clarity. God, just reveal this path. What's my purpose? What's the clarity? Well, God had already revealed my purpose for me. He revealed my calling, a year or two ago. And he told me it's more about commitment than it is clarity. You get a lot of clarity when you commit to the path that God has laid before you. The Bible says that God is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And that is very true, but it takes commitment to do that. So men must be built like a sword that is forged in the flame, built through challenge. So what is a man according to God? What does a man do? A man works. A man provides. He protects and he provides for his family. And I like this first verse that a man works, that any man who does not work does not deserve to eat. Well, a man was created to work. One of the first things God told Adam to do was to name the animals. In other words, he put them to work. So a man serves others. Like we talked about just a minute ago, it's not about me, me, me. It's about what can I do to help the next one in line and create more goodness. A man remains humble. God loves humble beginnings, but it requires humbling yourself. Those who humble themselves will be exalted, and those who exalt themselves will be humbled. You don't want to be humbled by God. A man is skilled, meaning he learns, he makes himself valuable by learning. He stands up for others. He's not the wolf, but he's certainly not the sheep. He stands up for others. He does what's right. He's strong. Man pursues God's purpose that God has placed in his heart. Man is obedient. And we learn about what disobedience can do to you in the story of Jonah and the whale. A man is a role model. And he does these things to be a role model. He's a good, godly man. He's a husband to a wife. A man acts like men. They're strong. They stand firm in the faith. And in this verse, 1 Corinthians 16, 13, 14, he goes on to say, everything he does as a man, he does it out of love. So being a man isn't always just about being dangerous or uncompassionate. That's not true at all. He does it through love because our whole duty is to spread more God. Well, what is God? God is love. That's part of serving others. A man stands firm in the faith, doesn't let anyone, anything, especially not Satan or someone else, remove him from God. A man is strong and courageous. A man guards his heart from the enemy, meaning he doesn't fight temptation. He gets the heck away from it. And a man equips himself with God's armor. It's a powerful verse, powerful section of the Bible, Ephesians 6. Talks about all the armor of God. So the bottom line here, guys, and all that you do it to glorify God. You love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. You love others the same way, and you lead by example so that others may become better followers as well. You glorify God by serving God and serving others and leaving this world a better place. So, what are some of your masculine gifts? What is it that makes you a man inherently? Well, there's a difference between masculinity and biblical masculinity. Let me touch on masculinity first. The essence of masculinity is the willingness to fight for what you believe in against all costs. Let me say that one more time. The essence of masculinity is the willingness to fight for what you believe in against all costs. How can we take it further in biblical masculinity? Biblical masculinity is very similar, with the exception of you're fighting for God's purpose. So biblical masculinity is the willingness to endure whatever stands in our way, meaning fight, fight, endure that battle, any battle that stands in our way, to fulfill God's purpose for us. And we all have gifts given to us by God. God's not going to give us these battles. There's going to be a lot of battles. When we want to live a godly life on this earth, which is, like I said, we're in this earth, but we're not of it, there's going to be a lot of battles that stand in our way. But God has given us these gifts and these tools that we need to endure those battles. And a man's gifts are all about protecting, providing, leading, serving. So some of these gifts include strength. We're physically strong. We're courageous. We're going to run into the battle. We're not going to run away from it. In fact, when someone gives us a challenge, our first instinct is to say yes. We want to take on that challenge. We have this willingness to take risks, do the dangerous things that others aren't willing to do. And I just want to say risk isn't a bad thing. Risk is what we need to grow. Risk is the requirement. In fact, there is no growth without risk. And men, inherently, we know that. We understand. And that's why we're so willing to take risks, because we want to learn and grow. Mastery. We want to continue to learn and develop a skill, make ourselves more valuable so that we can be better providers and better teachers and make the most of ourselves so we can spread the most good to others. We have a lot of determination, resilience. We're going to get back up when we get knocked down. We have a lot of grit, just that raw power, sacrifice. We sacrifice a lot of our own comfort so we can make those around us, those who depend on us, make their lives more comfortable and livable. And leadership. But a man feels most alive when he's embracing his masculinity. Just like the guys in this photo, it looks like they're going through a lot of pain. And yeah, it's painful, but I'm telling you, you ask them, they don't regret it. And they're probably having the time of their lives. So it's a big thing. It's one of the big things that I want to do here at The Man Within is help men embrace that masculinity fully to an extent that they've never experienced before in their life. So how do we get here? Big thing here. Initiation. An initiation is the beginning. Initiation is a test of a man's core strengths, his core gifts. So I said it's a test of a man's self-sufficiency. But I don't want to misconstrue anything here. You're never completely independent. You're never completely self-sufficient because we are always dependent on God. We always have God with us. We're never completely by ourselves. When I say this, what I really mean is it's a test of the gifts that God has given you. And God is there. He can give you a guiding hand, but he is the perfect father, and God isn't going to be there holding your hand. I'm sorry. Let me phrase this a different way. At some point, you've got to take off the training wheels. God's given you those gifts, and just as if you were being a good father, at some point you would need to let your son go. You would need to let your son test himself. Well, that's what this initiation is. So there are many different forms of initiation, but they all include a test of your core masculine gifts. These gifts of strength, courage, skill or mastery, and resilience, meaning your willingness to push through the pain. In initiation, you're beginning a new life born in Christ. You're beginning a new life of strength and standing firm in the faith, a new life knowing what your purpose is. In initiation, you're becoming a man. It's this form of becoming. And I want to say in initiation, touching on this keyword becoming, initiation isn't a singular event. It's not a one-day thing. Initiation it's a lifelong thing. You're challenging yourself. You're challenging these gifts every day. You're getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit every day. You're exercising discipline and challenging yourself every day, challenging your strength, your courage, your mastery, your resilience. Are you learning a new skill? Are you getting back up when you're tired? Are you brave enough to have those difficult conversations? Are you going to the gym and working on your physical strength? Are you working on your mental strength? But in initiation, the title of a man is given to those who have shown they are prepared to handle the responsibility that comes with it. You might have been born a male, but the title of man is something to be earned. It is a very special, it's a special title. A man is one who's proven himself worthy to hold that responsibility that comes with it. There's a lot of responsibility. It's a beautiful thing, but there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. They're not, no one's going to make you the CEO of a company if you don't have anything to show for it. Well, you're not going to be the leader of your family if you're not ready to lead. Men must be prepared to take on anything at any given time. That's why it's so important to keep testing yourself, challenging yourself. Who will your family look to when things go sideways? When danger is at your door, who's your family going to look to? Are you going to look to your wife? Are you going to look to your kids? Are you going to run to your neighbor? No, they're going to look to you. And if you're not comfortable looking to you to protect them, that's a problem. That's why this initiation is so important. So I wrote this quote: every man will come to the conclusion that no man, I didn't say no one because God's always there, but every man will come to the conclusion that no man is coming to save him. What makes a man is what he decides to do next. What makes a man is what he decides to do with that information. So we've talked about what a man is, what makes a man, how to become a man through initiation. But how do we continue to be a man? So I wrote down some 10 spiritual disciplines. I only wrote down 10 that I liked. Obviously, the Bible has plenty, but here are 10 that we can start with. So a spiritual discipline is how we stay obedient to God's commandments. So first thing, I wrote down purity. When we think of purity, generally we think about sex and holding off sex until marriage, but purity is so much more than that. Purity is a purification of our heart, purification of our soul. A purification process is removing the dirt. It's removing anything that is not us, anything that does not come from God. That's what purity really is. That's what purity really means. So that means getting rid of those temptations, getting rid of anything that might taint our soul. Next word, don't be selfish. Like we've talked about already a little bit, it's about serving others. It's about developing a relationship with others. Well, any relationship, the point of any relationship is to go in and to give. So don't be selfish. We are servants of the Lord. And something that my pastor said that I really liked is, a lot of us want to call ourselves servants, but we don't want to be treated like a servant. Well, as a man, we're not selfish and we are servants. Read the Bible. There's a great way to be obedient to the word is to know the word. So we read the Bible, we take time every day out of our day to read the Bible. Maybe it's just a devotional, maybe it's a verse. It's something. We read the Bible and continue to stay disciplined in that. We stand firm in the faith. Well, it's a lot easier to stand firm in the faith when you know the word and you have a good relationship with God. We hold our tongue. We listen before speaking. Guys, the wisest men are the ones who spend the most time listening. And half of a conversation involves listening. But you hold your tongue because once it is out in the world, once it's spoken, you can't get it back. So we listen before we speak. And just as a man giving some advice to other men, it's it's very, listen, listen before you speak, and it's okay to take a 3-second pause because once it's out in the world, it's spoken, and it's hard to make, you can't make a first impression twice. So, and not only that, you could ruin a long-time relationship by saying something you truly don't mean. And that all could have been avoided by taking 5 seconds to just listen, listen to the person speaking, and maybe take a second to listen to God. We work. A man works, especially for the glory of God. He works to protect and provide, and he works to spread the glory of God. We make sure that as men, we are faithful and we persevere. In this verse, Romans 5:3-4, we rejoice in our sufferings. Well, in order to rejoice in our sufferings, we have to be very faithful. And being faithful means rejoicing and being happy. Well, maybe not being happy, but rejoicing in all of God's works, even on our good days and on our bad days. There's going to be a lot of suffering. Like I said, when you when you're going to lead a godly life, it's going to be difficult. This means remaining faithful. And every day remind yourself of God's promises. That helps a lot with being faithful. Next, you have a brotherhood of Christian men, like this one, for instance. We talked about how iron sharpens iron and the benefits of being around other strong Christian men and how two minds can be better than one. But also, this goes along the lines of don't hang around bad influences. If you're not getting the results you want, there's a good chance that you're probably not in the right environment. And look, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And that is the truth. If you hang around 5 alcoholics, you're going to end up being the sixth. But if you hang around 5 Christian men, 5 successful Christian men, you're going to be the sixth. You give generously. Like I said, it's not about you. It's not about me, me, me. It's about serving. And we confess our sins to one another. That's a big one. It's probably one of the number one things that we as Christians and men avoid because it's embarrassing. But like we talked about, if you don't have any guilt, you won't be carrying it around with you, but also confessing it to one another. If you know that you're going to confess a sin or that you're going to have to, you're going to be a lot less likely to do it and to continue doing it. And that's why it's so important to have a good, strong Christian brotherhood. So, as Matthew 22 says, in all things, we love God with our heart, soul, and mind, and we love people as ourselves. So, God gave us this warrior spirit. Just want to talk about this masculinity, this warrior spirit. The Lord your God is with you at all times and all places, and he is a mighty warrior who saves. Well, a mighty warrior, he saves because he's willing to go into those dangerous things. He's willing to endure those dangerous battles. Well, God is a father, and if you as a man, part of you as a man is being a warrior, well, God is our father. He's got the warrior spirit too. And I'm telling you, if you have God fighting for you, no one can fight against you. So God takes great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but he will rejoice over you with singing. That is a loving God. And we are made in the image of God, and we are called to be as Christ-like as possible. And in Corinthians, it says, be an imitator of Christ. Well, Christ was a warrior in his own way. He was gentle and compassionate and kind, but he was also strong and he stood firm in the faith. And he had the warrior spirit to do the most difficult thing that had to be done. He had to endure the most gruesome of deaths out of love. His whole life was about serving. That was his mission. That's all of our mission, is to serve and to give and to love. And it was that warrior spirit that endured the hardest battle, the most gruesome thing that any human could have endured. And he did that for us. And he did that through his warrior spirit, which endures until the end. So in order to unleash your warrior spirit, you need to commit 100% of yourself into what God has called you to do. If you're not 100% committed to something, you're not going to be able to put 100% of yourself into it. Guys, the people who are at the top of whatever industry, those are the ones who are 100% committed. Those are the ones who have followed the calling of their hearts. And it's amazing what happens when you're aligned on God's path and you have God as the mighty warrior fighting behind you in your corner. You can only do that if you commit 100% of yourself into something. Well, that something is your purpose that God has put you on this earth to do. We're going to talk about purpose more here in just a second. But becoming who you're meant to be requires knowing your true self. Knowing your true self and your true purpose means knowing God. And God gave us a warrior spirit. We can stand any battle in our way. All right, so quick exercise for you guys. Take another 3 minutes. What do you believe God has called you to do? What sort of calling do you have in your heart? Have you experienced any signs from God? Have you heard from God that confirms that? What, if anything, is holding you back from committing 100% of yourself to this calling? Especially if you know it's coming from God. And while you guys are jotting that down, I'm just going to read this verse from Matthew 6. Don't be anxious, saying, don't worry about what shall we eat, what shall we drink, what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. Well, guys, God's given you these gifts of masculinity. He's given you the tools. He's going to give you everything you need. That's his promise to us. He's going to show us our path, and he's going to give us everything that we need at just the right time. So, something to think about when you are answering that last question, but I'll give you a couple minutes to just answer. All righty, guys. You can go ahead and take these questions, take them with you, and spend a couple minutes afterwards continuing to think through them a little more. And I'm sure if you sit and meditate and have some time with God, he will reveal that calling to you as it is promised. What are some of the benefits of embracing your true nature, embracing your true manhood? What are some of those benefits, especially today? Well, for number one, there's so few men, godly, strong Christian men today that there's really not much competition for you. In order to stand out in today's world, almost all you have to do is stand up. Like I said in the very beginning, it's much better to be wrong alone and stand up for what is right. I'm sorry, it's much better to be right and be alone than to be wrong in a crowd. But masculine man today, meaning a godly man today, it's more purpose driven because he has a relationship with God. They tend to be more attractive to women because women are most attracted to men who are on their journey and they're purpose driven and they're ambitious and they're going somewhere. They tend to have better relationships because they know how to serve. They want to go and give. They're better leaders because they know what a leader looks like. And they have a better role model of leadership. There's no better role model than Jesus. They're more fulfilled in their careers because guess what? They're committing themselves 100% to their calling, the calling of their heart. They're committing themselves to true freedom, which is God. They're able to make bigger contributions physically, sometimes financially, but they're serving because they know that's what they were called on this earth to do. So naturally, they want to contribute more. They have more passion and they have more excitement. I can tell you, starting your own business, pursuing the calling that God has bestowed on your heart, it's a scary thing, but at the same time, you'll never be more passionate, you'll never be more excited, and you'll never be more fulfilled. You have more respect. You have more respect for yourself, and because of that, you have more respect from others. And like I said on a previous slide, people are going to treat you exactly the way you believe you deserve to be treated. Well, if you believe that you deserve to be treated with respect, you're not going to allow disrespect, and people are going to notice that. So that's one of those awesome benefits. And because of all of that, you are more confident in yourself as a man. You're more confident in your purpose. You have clarity, and all of your steps have more confidence. And I can tell you one of the best ways to have confidence is number one, a relationship with God. But number two is knowing who you are and why you were placed on this earth. There's almost nothing else. But confidence really is just a reassurance of your abilities. Well, if you have a purpose and you commit to it and you're willing to endure those battles, take those risks, get outside of your comfort zone, you take those steps, well, you're going to have more reassurance in your abilities because you've tried and you've done it. And that's what makes you confident. There we go. So, where do you start? What are some steps to unleashing that godly man? Number one, connect with God. You need to have that relationship with God. That's the very first thing I did back in that picture that I had in 2017 when I hit my knees and I was crying on my 22nd birthday and I was deep in depression when I felt like I had literally I didn't really have any friends. I had no one. It just felt like everything was stripped away from me. All happiness, all joy is just gone. All of these problems welled up at the same time. It was very overwhelming. I didn't know what to do, and it just felt like I had no one. And at 22 years old, I had God as a last resort. But God made me his first priority, even though I made him my last resort. At 22 years old, that's when my life changed because I decided to finally make that relationship with God. That's number one. It's always going to be the very first thing. It's the number one start of your journey. It's the first step. It's the first thing you do at the beginning of the day and the last thing you do at the end of your day. You prioritize God, he will prioritize you. I promise you, it's the only way. Next, we're going to find our purpose out of that relationship with God. And then we're going to do it. God will reveal the path, but we got to put in the work. He'll steer the ship, but we're pushing, but we're rowing the boat. So these are the steps. So let's walk through them here. If you want something you never had, you've got to do something you've never done. I know that's not fun to hear, but it is the truth. And that's why I'm here teaching it to you. Number one, in this relationship with God. As we talked about earlier in the beginning of this workshop, we have this internal battle of the flesh, the desires of the flesh, and the desires of the spirit, meaning your connection with God. One of this very first difficult steps is taking up our cross, removing ourselves from the desires of the world and being born anew. We talked about the initiation being the beginning. Well, this is this difficult first step. And I want to kind of just dissect this verse here about taking up your cross. You're bearing that load. As I've said, each man has his own load to bear. This is the difficult one. No one can fix your problems for you. So let's just walk through this verse here. Jesus is talking to his disciples saying, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? What can a man give in return for his soul? Meaning, what is more valuable than his soul, which is a permanent thing on a temporary plane? This cross that Jesus is talking about, Jesus gave this command, first of all, after first telling his disciples about the pain he's going to have to endure. So imagine this scene. Jesus saying, hey, I know that we put all this work in, but this is how it's going to end. I know that I'm your rabbi. I know that I'm your teacher. I know that I'm the savior, but I am going to endure this very gruesome thing. I have my own cross that I have to take up. And in his case, it wasn't just speaking figuratively. In those days, the cross was associated with the most horrific death. But Jesus when he's talking about taking up our cross, he's giving us fair warning of the pain and suffering that is on the path of living a godly life. And we as men, we must be prepared. It's a big burden to take. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Well, Jesus is the truth. The truth is what sets us free. That's the most loving thing you can give someone is the truth, which is freedom. At the same time, it's one of the most painful things, which is why Jesus is giving us fair warning, saying, as men, lift up your burden, take up your cross, remove yourself. You have to, what he's saying here is you have to shed yourself from the desires of your flesh. You have to shed your old self. When you're taking up your cross, you're a new creation in him. Well, in order to be a new creation, you have to kill off that which you are not. That's that purification. It's difficult. It's painful, but it's what we must do. Die to yourself. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is past and the new has come. Separate yourself from your flesh and take up your cross. What is purpose? Here is the long form answer that I've created. Your purpose is the calling that God placed in your heart before he even created you, that is fully committed to serving others as an act of glorifying God. That's a long form answer. Quick is God's design for you and your life. That is what purpose is. It's a long-term solution. It's a permanent solution, an eternal solution to a life eternal. So live life on purpose with purpose. So what are God's promises, but some of those requirements for purpose? Number one, God created you with a purpose. In Ephesians 2:10, it says that God created each of us with a purpose, and he gave us that purpose in advance of us even being here. I mean, he crafted us with his own hands. He crafted that purpose. He knew the purpose for us before we even before we were even born. And if we want to understand our lives, we need to, why go to the owner's manual when you can go to the guy that created it? I mean, the owner's manual is great, and you should be referring to that. But what I'm trying to tell you is you need to go straight to the source. You want to find your purpose, you want to fill that void, you go straight to the source. Go to the one that created you and designed you. You will have a calling. That calling is placed in our heart. God lays that path out for you. He is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. You get clarity through God, and you get clarity through committing, which we already talked about. You get a lot of clarity when you commit on God's path. You commit to that. You'll be given certain gifts to achieve your calling, like those masculine gifts, for instance. But each of us has our own specific gift, which related to each of our own calling. Maybe you want to be an artist. Maybe you want to be a welder. Maybe you want to be a financial advisor. Maybe you want to be 100 other things. Whatever it is, he gives you that gift so you can achieve the calling of your heart. Your purpose is always about serving others. Our purpose is always about spreading love. Well, what is God? God is love. Our whole purpose on earth is to glorify God, to spread more God, to serve others. Well, one of our ways to glorify is to pursue the calling of our hearts, pursue that purpose. If we're doing what we love, then we are subconsciously spreading love. And if we're committing 100% to it, if we have God's power behind us, we're spreading a lot of love. So I just want to say something that I learned is that there's an infinite number of ways to spread love. And in each of those ways, there's an infinite amount of love that you can get. That you can give. I don't know what's going on there. So, yes, it's all about serving. One of the requirements, you must put in the work. Like I said, God will steer the ship. Jesus will take the wheel, but you got to push the car. He'll show you the light to that path, but you got to put the work in. You still got to take it. You still got to be willing to endure it. You must remain faithful. We talked about It's going to be hard. Most of the time, it's going to be suffering. In those times of suffering, you have to remain faithful and understand that God always delivers on his promises just at the right time. It's not going to be your time, which is good. It's always going to be on God's time. That takes a lot of patience and faithfulness. Your growth will be painful, but it is required. That's kind of how God works. The formula is not instant gratification. It's always delayed gratification. God's formula for growth is always a little short-term pain for a long, I want to say a lifetime or an eternity of pleasure, but everything on this earth is temporary. So in God's terms, it's this temporary life is the short-term pain, but there is a lot of room for joy and happiness and peace and comfort even on this world, but that only happens through the short-term pain. God will give you what you need exactly when you need it, and God will give you more when you've shown more responsibility. And in Luke, it says, if you could be trusted with little, God will give you a lot, but he's not going to give you more until you've proven yourself responsible and grateful for what you have at the time. God helps the man whose path is aligned with his. I really like this one. This is a quote that kind of shaped my life. God helps the man who knows exactly what he wants, meaning he knows God's purpose for him. He knows the calling of his heart, and he stays on it. He's aligned. His path is aligned with God's, and he commits to it 100%. Well, when you commit to God's path, supernatural doors can open for you. God won't give you a battle you can't overcome. Be a lot of battles in your life, but God always gives you exactly what you need when you need it. When that battle comes, you stay faithful, you endure it, you don't go around it, don't try to avoid it the way Jonah did. You remain faithful, you put on the armor of God, and you get through it and you grow. And once you grow, you show gratitude for what you had and faithfulness, God will move you to the next level of responsibility. So a lot of good things come in the next level, but also a lot of responsibility. You got to prove that you're ready for it. God will bless you beyond your wildest dreams. And I can tell you guys, you stay on that path, you stay faithful, he will do so. I like this little quote here. Purpose is not what you do. I'm sorry. Purpose isn't what you find. It's what you do. It's not what you find. It's what you do. God will reveal that path to you. Now you got to get on and do it. What is God's plan for purpose? Ecclesiastes, purpose is set for eternity. We're not storing up our riches on earth. We're not sowing temporary seeds. Everything we do, our purpose is set for eternity. So when we spread love, when we're spreading God, what we're trying to do is set them up for a life of eternity in heaven. So if we're committing 100% to God's purpose, his calling in our heart, we're also being obedient to God. We have these spiritual disciplines and we obey God's commands, and we're serving, and we're standing firm in the faith, and we're being a good, godly role model. Subconsciously, if you're pursuing your purpose, you subconsciously give others permission to do the same. And that's what it is all about. So that's the eternity. God prepared our path in advance, which we spoke about in Ephesians 2:10. Clarity comes from pursuing God, meaning staying committed to the path. A lot of times, God's path it seems strange to us, but I heard something the other day that it seems weird because God is operating in a supernatural realm and he's preparing to provide a supernatural gifts, supernatural opportunities. So whatever the path is, if it seems weird or uncomfortable, I just take it as a good sign that God's shaping up to do something big in the next chapter. Our purpose is to serve others. Whatever you do it for the heart, for the Lord, and not for people. What that means, that doesn't mean, you don't care about other people. It just means you do it from the heart for God is love. If you're doing it out of love, you're spreading more love to people. You're not ignoring people. You're not trying to make relationships with people. We are called to love others as we love ourselves. And love comes from God. So when you're doing it, whatever you do, I said your purpose is godly purpose. And if you pursue that, you subconsciously give others permission to do the same. And that's one of the ways that we serve others. We trust in God that He will make our path straight. He will make our path straight, and He will make it so that we do not falter. God puts a thorn in our flesh to keep us humble. So we learn lessons and challenges. So, for example, life is not perfect, which means we're always going to have something to work towards. Guys, there's a lot of battles overseas, but there's a lot of battles here at home too. That's why we got to put on that armor and continue that warrior spirit and fight for what's right. God loves humble beginnings. Humble yourself, lest you will be humbled. God loves humble beginnings, meaning you got to start. You got to start where you are at. And don't expect things to come easy. Don't be tempted by these get rich quick schemes. You've got to put the work in. Anything that's worth anything, any value, requires a lot of time and effort and sacrifice. But God loves humble beginnings. And if you stay on that path, you commit to it, He'll make your path straight, and He will open up supernatural opportunities for you at just the right time. To live life on purpose with purpose. Oh, lastly, God does not reward shortcuts. Like I just said, He doesn't reward the get rich quick schemes. Why must you pursue God's purpose? Guys, number one, fulfillment. That's a big word that I heard a lot of in my journey. You know, we always want to be fulfilled. I want to get on this path to fulfillment. Well, what is fulfillment? Fulfillment is defined as an achievement or a completion of one's duties or promises made. Well, one of those promises we made was a covenant with God. That covenant is we push the boat and we let God steer. A covenant isn't just a signed contract. It's not just ink on a page. It's it's a promise with your soul. And if you're going to make a covenant with God, that's something that cannot be broken. Now, God's going to fulfill, and He's going to achieve or complete His duties and His promises, and He's given us a lot. He's promising us a lot more than we have to Him. I mean, we're promising Him our soul and our life's mission. That's, you know, it's everything that we have, but everything that we can give back to God is nothing in comparison that He has already given to us and will continue to give to us. Next, you are one of one. Like I said, you've been given a gift. You've been given a purpose that is unique. Only you can fulfill that one thing. Even if you're in the same career, the same industry, you're a different person. And you have a different calling on your heart. You're unique. And you're the only one to fulfill that purpose. You are one of one. Success is found in the fulfillment of your purpose. When you're fulfilling, meaning you're upholding your covenant with God, that's what success is. And as Tony Robbins says, success without fulfillment is the greatest tragedy. You know, if you get to a place where you have a ton of money or you stored up the world's riches and you have no one to share it with and you're just alone at the end of the day, that's the greatest tragedy, because you spent too much time focusing on yourself. You've fallen into the temptations of the enemy, and you've gotten to a place where you've tried to fill up this void, this God-shaped void within you, and you've stored it with temporary things, and you've tried to find meaning and pleasure, and now you've ended up with neither. The only true success, the only true fulfillment is found in the fulfillment of your purpose that God has given you. Pursuing your purpose naturally strengthens your natural gifts. Like I said, God is going to give you what you need when you need it. And sometimes that's in the form of growth. So if you need to be tough, He's going to give you a tough challenge. You're going to become the man you were born to be. You're going to reach your fullest potential. That's a lifelong mission. It's not a singular event. God won't assign you without equipping you. He's going to give us those gifts we need right when we need them. He's going to strengthen those gifts, those natural masculine gifts, strength, courage, mastery, resilience. He's going to naturally strengthen those for us exactly when we need it. It's going to be uncomfortable. Got to remain faithful. You can't give fully if you don't believe in the mission. But no mission is more important than yours. That's what you got to believe. You have to believe. Everyone's mission is important in God's eyes. And you should be doing everything you can to help others find God and pursue their calling. But what I'm saying is, for you, no mission is more important than yours. You have to be committing 100% to your mission, because you're one of one. You're the one that's got to do it. It's impossible to give 100% if you don't believe 100%. Well, believe in yourself the way God believes in you. And never, ever give up on your purpose. Worst thing you can do. Giving up on your purpose it's giving up on a life of fulfillment. And that's just not easy to hear, but it's the truth. So where a man lacks purpose, he fills it with pleasure. God is not done with you yet. If you search for meaning and pleasure, you'll end up with neither. Here's a cool little quote. Without purpose, a man will direct his strength towards self-sabotage, meaning he's trying to fill that void, that God-sized hole in his heart, with worldly things. His life will lack meaning because he has nowhere to use his masculine gifts. And without God, he fills it with ungodly things, which leads to ungodly consequences. He's like a ship trying to sail on dry land and a warrior in a garden. Well, it's much better to be a warrior. Sorry. It's much rather to be a warrior in a war than a warrior in a garden. Why do we do hard things? Let's get to the part where we're actually doing it. Well, we do hard things, namely to prove to ourselves that we can do hard things. That's where we get that confidence. Like I said, confidence is a reassurance of our abilities. So God gives us hard things to do, and we do them. He wants us to see that we can truly do them. If we stay on God's path, we can be sure that difficulty is always in the near future. There's always going to be a battle. There's always going to be a struggle. But God uses that to strengthen us. That's his form of delayed gratification. God's formula is short-term pain for long-term pleasure. But men, we have to do these difficult things because we have a lot of responsibility. We have the burden of responsibility, especially being the leader in our lives, in our family. Our wife depends on us. Our children depend on us. Our future self depends on us. Those in our community, there's a lot of people that are depending on us to do these hard things, to grow, become stronger, so that we have become equipped to handle difficult things at any given time. We have to be prepared to carry the burden at any given time. With great power comes great responsibility. And that is a very true thing. That's why we do these difficult things. How does God use this risk to help us grow? Let's talk about risk. Risk is the currency, the price you pay for life. It can also be defined as the effect that uncertainty has on objectives. But like I talked about earlier, risk is the requirement for growth. It's the requirement for anything. It's the requirement for breaking that cycle. If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. And risk, every time you step out of that comfort zone, there's risk. Now, it's commonly defined as the probability of loss. So we've been given a negative connotation of risk, but I encourage you to think about it differently. You must take risk if you want any reward. You must take risk if you want to live. You must take risk. And a lot of times risk is really just the way that humans define it is risk is doing what humans wouldn't maybe not normally do. Well, you don't want to be a normal human. You want to separate yourself from the flesh. You want to separate yourself from the world. If you're taking risk and you're following God, that is the right journey. Risk is the tool that makes us adapt to change so that we can grow. Risk is a curveball thrown at us that we maybe didn't think that we were ready for. It's something different, but it forces us to adapt to our environment so that we can grow. It's the degree to which our plans change. Risk is the actions that we take given the uncertainties. Even though we're uncertain of what lies in front of us, it's the actions that we take given the uncertainties. And a lot of the things in our life are going to be very uncertain. And as I said, risk is growth. The requirement for growth is risk. It's impossible to grow without risk. When we take on a little risk, we must let go of some control. We must let go of some comfort and accept discomforts to our plan. It's, we go into things expecting things to be a certain way. We lay out our plan, but it's never going to go according to our plan. And that's where that risk comes into play. It's a change to our plan. But each time you accept risk, you learn from it. No matter what, you learn from it, whether it turns out the way you wanted or whether it turns out a way that you didn't want it to. You learn from it either way. So risk can come in different forms, come in time, money, relationships, physical danger. Maybe it's the weather, etc. It's just a change to your plan that forces you to adapt. Well, when you adapt, you grow. The one thing you cannot risk losing is your purpose. The magnitude of change determined by how much risk you're willing to take. All right. There we go. So what is the consequence of not taking any risks? Well, you remain in a comfort zone that continues to shrink, which we talked about. The comfort zone shrinks until you die, unless you get the heck out of that comfort zone and be willing to take that risk. Most people who retire decide to go back to work because of boredom, meaning they didn't have a lifelong purpose. Pursuing God's path takes a lot of risk because there's a lot of uncertainty in it. But I can tell you, you're never going to find something that's you're more passionate or excited about or something that's more fulfilling. It just takes a lot of risk. There's a lot of uncertainty, but where there's uncertainty for you, there's a lot of clarity from God and his path. Another negative outcome, there's no story to tell. You're not the main character in your own life. And I just want to go back to the last point because I don't think I finished it fully. They don't have a lifelong purpose. A lot of people who retire from that 9 to 5 lifestyle, they want to find something else to do. They're like, oh man, my life doesn't have any meaning. Well, when you're pursuing your purpose, that's a lifetime thing. Like I said, it's eternity. So when you get older, you might work less and less, but you have something to do. You have something you love doing. You're doing what you love. And when you do what you love, it feels less like a job and more like a lifelong mission, a lifelong purpose. The risk of taking no risk, unfulfillment. You might have gotten really successful, but did you obey God's commands? Did you uphold and fulfill your end of that promise to God? Did you fulfill your end of that covenant? You'll never see your fullest potential. You might have gotten strong in the world's standards, but did you really find your full potential? Do you know what you're really truly capable of? And here's a question I want you to think about. Imagine the end of your life, you get to the gates of heaven and God greets you. But standing beside God is the man you were supposed to be, the man that God created you to be. The biggest risk is not taking any. Be the main character in your own life. So one more exercise before we close this out. Reflect back on the calling that God placed in your heart. According to those calling, what risks have you been avoiding? What's the worst thing that could happen if you pursued that calling? What's the best thing that could happen if you pursued that calling? And I want you to go big, all out. You can't go bigger than God. So what's the biggest thing, the best thing that you could imagine happen if you pursued that calling? What can you do right now, according in accordance to that calling? What can you do right now? Right. All right. Thank you guys so much for attending. Let's go ahead and review. What did we cover today? Where we're at, how we got here. What's the difference between biblical masculinity and the world's definition of masculinity? What is the role of a man according to God? How do you become that man? We learned that through initiation. And now, if you are on the call with us, you're welcome to stick around for some very exciting next steps of where you can go. Where's the man within going next? If you stay inside of your box, you keep your comfort but lose your soul. Quote by Jordan Peterson. Now I want to leave you with an awesome quote that I love. If it is humanly possible, a man should consider it to be within reach. So, guys, find that calling, have that connection with God, and start your journey. Get on that path. You have God's power behind you. You should consider it to be within reach. All right. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, attending. This next part is going to be for people that are on the call only. If you are interested in joining a call, another workshop, go ahead and give me a follow, and you will be up to date on all of the upcoming workshops. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. If you did, feel free to leave a testimony, a comment, something to show how much value you gain from it. And I'd love to hear some of your responses to some of those exercise questions. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you on the next one.